Chapter 6 is going to look at victims and the police. But first, let's talk about which criminal justice professionals in general are involved with victims' issues. This would involve police, prosecutor, judges, and corrections. And a lot of times the system creates more conflict than resolution for victims. Victims often will complain that they feel victimized all over again when going through the criminal justice process. So what do victims want? Punishment or restitution? They often have three goals. They want offenders punished, they want to compel them to be rehabilitated, and they often want restitution. They want to be repaid for losses and injuries that they suffered. In terms of punishment's usually justified on utilitarian grounds as a necessary evil. Recall that deterrence is both general and specific. Okay, so it curbs future criminality as general, and the other idea is that the offender learns a lesson and is discouraged from breaking the law again. Specific deterrence. Hopefully, punishment also satisfies a desire for revenge and decreases vigilantism. Punishment can also be seen as retribution, retaliation in kind, or an eye for an eye. Basically, the idea here is that punishment rights a wrong and restores balance. But the thirst for revenge can really undercut someone's recovery if it becomes too much of a focus for the victim. It also prolongs memories of victimization. Some former victims are at the forefront of depriving offenders of any privileges they have. But this approach in general still remains controversial because we have high rates of imprisonment and that's not very practical. It's also expensive and ineffective. What about rehabilitation? Some victims want professionals to help them become decent, productive, law-abiding citizens. Victims most likely to endorse rehabilitation if the offender was not a complete stranger. So when they somehow know the offender, they're more likely to want to rehabilitate them. They may also become dismayed if heavy-handed policies drive the offender to become more violent. And finally, restitution. Some victims want to recoup their losses and pay their bills as a result of the crime. This could include loss of pay, medical expenses, and bills that aren't paid due to being out of work. So some victims want restitution as opposed to retribution or rehabilitation. So police are often the first representatives of the criminal justice system with whom victims come into contact. And victims are the primary consumers of police services. So if the police are slow to arrive, don't believe them, conduct a superficial investigation, don't make an arrest, or fail to recover stolen property, victims may be disappointed. So who's most likely, in terms of reporting incidents, people are most likely to report crimes involving a weapon, a physical injury, or substantial financial loss. In terms of violent crimes, aggravated assault is the most reported, and rape is the least reported. So here we could see a trend in crime reportings from 1973 to 2013. Okay, we can see 1973, 1983, 1988, and then we have 98, 06, 10, and 13. And you can see how these reporting rates have changed or remained relatively stable. So what are reasons people report violent crimes to the police? Well, they want to prevent future violence, they want to stop the offender and protect others. Other people might also talk about catching and punishing the offender and wanting to fulfill their civic duty. Remember, though, that citizens are not required to inform authorities of crimes committed against them or on their property. However, if they conspire or collaborate in a cover-up to conceal a serious crime, then they can be charged with what's called misprision of a felony. So one thing that victims want is they want the police to respond quickly, okay? And they want them to apprehend the offender. Remember, though, that dispatchers are getting all kinds of calls and they have to prioritize which ones are most important. So sometimes there's also a lag between the crime and when it's discovered. You might come home and find out you've been burglarized, but you're not sure when it happened. It could have, if you've been out of the house for 8, 10, 12 hours, it could have happened at any point. Sometimes people are confused about whether or not what happened is illegal. Sometimes people also want to stop and kind of think about the emotions and regain their composure before they actually report to the police. So here's some trends we could see in terms of police response time to violent crime from years 1990 to 2008. Okay, we see it's broken down by within 5 minutes, 6 to 10, 11 to 60, and within 1 hour. The total within 1 hour. So you can see response times haven't changed too much. Victims also anticipate that when the police arrive, they'll be sensitive and polite, treat them with dignity, respect their rights, and make decisions in an open and transparent manner. But this doesn't always happen. So you want to make sure that you don't come across as an officer as disinterested, remote, or unconcerned. Sometimes when police doubt the victim's credibility, they might discontinue an investigation. We also want to remember that even though the police might seem disinterested or unconcerned, that emotional detachment is a coping skill, right? Police cannot allow themselves to become emotionally entangled in every crime they investigate, or they will burn out very easily. A lot of police departments have been training officers in how to deal with victims and victims' issue, how to administer psychological first aid, and they learn the importance of responding quickly, listening attentively, showing concern, and refraining from challenging the victim's versions of events. So once the police have received a report, several things can happen, right? A complaint or a report of a crime can be founded, which means the police verify it. Unfounded, which means they reject it. Or defounded, where the police believe it has occurred, but it's not as serious as reported. Police often misclassify these to make their statistics look better. So, for instance, a crime is only supposed to be cleared by exceptional circumstances under 4 very specific criteria. But police departments, which means then that they have to be cases where the police know who the offender is, but they're unable to locate them or make an arrest. But in a lot of police departments, people clear by exception things that they're just not going to have prosecuted either. And that's actually not correct. So in terms of clearance rates, homicides have about a 64% clearance rate. Larceny is about 23%, vehicle theft about 14%, robberies around 30%, rape around 60%, have no attacker arrested. And for aggravated assault, 42% have no arrests made. And here we could see some trends in clearance rates, okay? Notice, though, that the murder rate between 1953 and 2013, the clearance rate has decreased dramatically. This is hypothesized to be a result of an increase in stranger murders, or murders where the relationship is unknown, which makes it then, of course, more difficult to solve. Notice also for rape that the clearance rate has decreased dramatically as well. That is not due to an increase in stranger rape. So law enforcement is under no comparable constitutional pressure to tell victims about their rights or obligations or opportunities. And in fact, we want to remember that victims are just another witness in the case as far as the system is concerned. So in terms of recovering stolen property, we don't really have good data of this, okay? What we do have seems to be fairly consistent, okay? Recovered property is also often kept by the police to be used in a trial. For instance, my house was burglarized and a laptop was stolen once from my home. And when I spoke to the police about it, they said, if you would like to press charges, then we have to hold on to the laptop until it goes to court. So what I really wanted was just to recover the laptop. And I couldn't really afford for the police to hang on to that laptop for potentially years. So some police departments have victim advocacy units, okay, and that's often part of a community policing philosophy. You might want to think about whether or not that makes sense for your police department if you're the person who's able to kind of make those decisions. We want to think about how to prioritize dealing with victims' concerns. We do know that there are many studies on sexual assault that talk about how the police respond to them. And when the police treat victims as credible, and they build a good rapport with them, and they go slowly and allow them to tell their story, that they get better evidence. Victims then feel more comfortable, they disclose more to the police, and it makes it easier to prosecute those cases. That wraps up the chapter on police.